Yeah, so give it all to Maria with a nice round of applause.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for having me here. Here are my slides. So I just repeat what Xenia said. My name is Maria Korneeva, and since I am a freelancer, I can actually pick up the position that I have by myself. So I could be a CEO, but I just decided to call myself front-end technology lead at the moment. I am a Google developer expert in Angular and accessibility. I have been giving courses in Angular and accessibility since 2 years, but this year I decided this is not enough, and that's why I'm writing a book. And it could be a bragging and self-promotion slide, but the book is not ready, and it's in German, so no. Anyway, everyone is talking about Angular 19 and all the hot, interesting topics now. Like, well, we've just heard that partial hydration, with incremental hydration, after render effect, linked signal, ARIA sources, whatnot. So there are a lot of talks about it. So, well, this is not this talk. Instead, we're going to talk about accessibility, in particular, Angular accessibility. Since I just have 30 minutes, I decided just to bring one number, and this is 4%. 4% of babies are born with disabilities. And I find this number impressive by what it does not say. And what it does not say is that 96% of all disabilities come throughout the course of life, meaning we're just temporarily abled, meaning it can happen to everyone, including me. So when we're building accessible web applications, we're doing this for us. Well, this is nice from the human side of us. But I'm a sarcastic and pragmatic person. We also build accessible applications because we have to. So who have heard about European Accessibility Act already? Nice, yeah, a few, yeah, but not everyone, so it's still worth it. What is it? It is a European directive which obligates all European countries to introduce national legislation on web accessibility. In particular, all e-commerce websites of bigger companies have to be accessible by 2025. This European Accessibility Act refers to the European norm 301/549, and this European norm mentions Web Content Accessibility Guidelines 2.1. So basically, if you have to implement an accessible website, Web Content Accessibility Guidelines is what you can take and meet the requirements mentioned there. By the way, if you want to know more about the European Accessibility Act, talk to me in the breaks, because it just doesn't fit in the 30 minutes. So yeah, what is this Web Content Accessibility Guidelines? Just briefly, basically these guidelines state that a web application is accessible if it is designed and implemented in a way that users with disabilities can perceive the content, can interact with it or operate it, can understand the content, and in a robust way, meaning that your application works in multiple user agents on several devices and preferably also in the future versions as well. These principles, perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust, are divided into guidelines, and these guidelines are divided into success criteria. These success criteria are grouped by the conformance levels. So we have A, AA, and AAA. And by the way, I'm super satisfied with ChatGPT coming up with the title of my talk. It's Angular Accessibility Adventures, so AAA, what we have. For European Accessibility Act, we have to comply with the A and AA success criteria. So yeah, that's just the introduction, but we're talking about Angular, right? So how accessible is Angular? Well, I've read and heard several opinions on the internet, and on the one hand, one can say there is nothing special about Angular accessibility. On the other hand, what I've heard and seen multiple times, like, oh, single page applications and custom components is just like the end, the hell for accessibility, so you cannot build an accessible single page application. We'll find out in a moment what's the right answer. You don't have to answer it for yourself yet. I'd like to introduce a couple of arguments for both sides. First of all, what our browser sees when the application lands in the user agent is just HTML, JavaScript, CSS, and ARIA. So, well, Tanya will give a talk on semantic HTML later on, yes. So my warm recommendation for that. Basically, this is just the structure of our application. JavaScript gives us some movement, some interaction. CSS, just like clothes, can hide something or just make it look beautiful. And ARIA is the cognitive part, more of the communication, semantics, understanding, and all this stuff. So that if you put those four technologies together, it's just a living person, it's a living application, how the browser sees. So you can see here, there's no Angular in the browser, because browser just can't speak these technologies. So, yeah. Maybe this is the left part of the opinion. Maybe there's nothing special about Angular. By the way, if you're not familiar with ARIA, just quick one slide. Accessible Rich Internet Applications is a suite of attributes that you can add to your HTML to add some semantic roles, some state or properties if they are missing. So accessible is part of this term. So one might think the more ARIA, the more accessible. This is not true. ARIA is a promise. It is a semantic promise. If you say something is a button using role button, it has to behave like a button. It has to look like a button. It has to smell like a button. It has to be a button. Because otherwise, our users will be confused, and we don't want to confuse the users. So yes, my warning to you, please use ARIA only if you know what you're doing. With this being said, coming again to our question and looking at the different side. So if there is nothing special to Angular accessibility, why do they have like a special section for that in the documentation? By the way, if you're not aware of this part of the best practices, please read it. It's also a warm recommendation from me. And then, why do they have like code labs if there is nothing special about Angular accessibility? Once again, my warm recommendation if you're not aware of this resource. And then I have like a weird stuff here. What happens if we apply a route link to an image? And while you're thinking about it, I want to show it. And for this, I wonder what I should do, because now my browser is not appearing here. I just stopped presenting. Looks good, yeah. So I have an application here, which is quite basic. I have a form, I have some books, and I have some text, some tables, some videos. So some typical use cases for accessibility. What I will do here, it's my app component where I have the logo. I hope it's big enough. Is there anyone who cannot see the screen or the text is too small? Okay, so I just add route a link, and I just will use the about path to this. And if I go here, if I switch the browser, go to the DevTools, and look at my image, I have the route a link, all good. I have the alt tag, alt attribute, sorry, all good. But then again, some tab index 0. I didn't write this code. What happened? Angular added this for me. Well, because I made a link out of my image, and a link is an interactive element. So Angular knows that all interactive elements have to be accessible by via keyboard. And now I'm able to reach it via keyboard and focus it. Well, it's still not the optimal solution, because the screen readers still don't know how to announce it, because there is no alt attribute. We don't know where to go and where we will land if we click this link. The better way is, of course, the traditional one, just wrap it in an A tag. Well, that's quite logical. What I mean to say with this is that there's still something what happens between your Angular code and the browser in terms of accessibility. So maybe there's still something into this problem with single-page applications. You probably already know the answer. It's somewhere in between. And to demonstrate it, here again, the overview over the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines with all the criteria that we have. And I've highlighted the criteria where you might face some problems, unexpected behaviors from Angular, or some help, some syntactical sugar or something, some low-hanging fruits that you can implement in your applications to make it accessible. In particular, page title. We're dealing with single-page applications. We're actually lying to our users, pretending that they're navigating to a different page by updating the view in accordance to the URL. But in fact, it's still the same HTML document that stays in the browser. And one document, one title. So we have to update the titles when the user navigates. It's kind of logical and no-brainer. And here, what we can do, I go to the routes, the next one. You already know it. You can use the titles in your route configuration so that when we go to the application, which is somewhere here, it's here. Once again, I have to stop presenting. Here it is. So if you navigate, you see that the title updates with the navigation. You can also use the title strategy for that. If you have some more complex cases, you can implement the custom title strategy, and then you can add, for example, the website title at the end of your unique title. In our case, that would be something like new book accessible reads, or some other custom logic that is available to you. The next point is we still stay with the navigation and come to the location part. Location part is a AAA criteria, so it's a highest standard, but it's we have it out of the box. It's a very low-hanging fruit. If we go to the navigation component, you see here my list item indicating the navigation item, and I have here router link active with the class that will be appended if this navigation item is the active link. And the problem with this is it's just visible. If I navigate, you see this underlining. That's what my active link class does, but that's just what we see. We don't hear it. And for screen readers, we need some semantics to add to that so that screen readers will also get this information. We can do this with ARIA current when active. And if I do this, if I add ARIA current when active to my items, what happens is Angular will append ARIA current with the value page, because this is the page, to my element, and will, of course, as with the router link active, append this class to the next active link when I navigate. So with the combination of these two, you have the visual representation of the active item of the location and the information for the screen readers. The navigation itself can become very, unpleasant. For example, if we go to Amazon, there are a lot of links in the navigation. I have to go through all of this before I can get to the main content. That's why there is a common design pattern to introduce skip links. Skip link is usually the first focused element on the page so that I can jump straight to the main content. So if we do this in Angular, the intuitive approach would be just to give an ID to my main element and then use href, and I will change it a bit and just go and have content. If I try this in the browser, I will have the link. If I click on this, suddenly the page is reloaded, and I have this content, but it's not really, it is even focused, but the whole page reloaded. And if I go to about, for example, then suddenly I will end up at books instead of about main content. Why is it so? Well, single page applications. The problem is that our app component sits, it's not a routed component, it sits at the page ref. So if I just take hash content, it won't know which URL we're currently in. So in this case, we have to adjust the solution, and I revert it. And in the TS part, we need the instance of a router, we wait till the navigation end, and once we're there, we are able to assemble our skip links ourselves by getting the URL from the router. And if I do this way, I am at the books, let's go to new book, and I skip to main content, and well, you don't see it here, maybe it's not the best. Let's have books. Well, I go to the books, so it works like this, just because I have to provide the specific URL where we are now at the moment. Next point, navigation. We'll still stick with the navigation. If the user wants to come from one page to another, in the case of multiple page applications, the focus will usually be reset so that we start from the beginning. With the single page applications, it's still one document, so the focus is being kept, the state of the focus. Meaning, if I have here, for example, on the About page, I have down there a link, just let me get there, view our books. This is a link which leads to the books view, and if I click it, well, my focus ring disappears. Well, because the element that had focus before, well, it's destroyed. The component is destroyed, so the focus has nowhere to go, so it gets lost. And when focus gets lost, depending on the browser, but usually it goes to the body. So as of now, our focus is on the body, and we don't see it because the body element is not usually focusable. If I tab further, you will see that now I'm at the books, which is not so bad because that's where we wanted to go, but it's for you to understand that we just lost the focus at the moment, and this is a potential violation of Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. In here, I don't have a ready-made optimal solution, and that's a bummer. What we can do, we could focus the skip link upon the navigation so that it resembles or it goes to the direction of the multi-page application so that the users begin at the beginning of our page every single time when they navigate. Then again, there is a recommendation to focus the main heading. So here, H1, our books. The problem with that is that the headings are not focusable. You remember, only the interactive elements are focusable natively. So if we try to focus headings just like that, it won't work. If you add tab index -1, which would make it available for focus via JavaScript or TypeScript, well, then we have a problem that if we load the page initially, then the heading will still be focused first. And that's not what we want because, well, we should keep the logical focus order. And if the users come to our page, we want them to start at the beginning because they might want to start with the navigation first if they are not familiar with the website. So yeah, in this case, maybe leaving things as it is for now the best solution. Maybe it will work for you with the skip link. Maybe you want to focus the document itself. So for now, I'm open to discussion. As I said, just come to me after the talk or after the conference, and let's talk about this case. Coming further, as I said, just jumping in the middle of the web page is not the best practice because it confuses the users, especially in the case of autofocus. There are a very limited number of use cases where it's okay. For example, the search bar of the Google homepage. Everyone would go to this input field, and then it's okay to put autofocus there. Otherwise, you should be really, really, really considerate if you really need, if you really want to have this autofocus. Let's imagine I really, 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 really want to have this autofocus in my form, and I put it in the first input. Here, autofocus. That won't work. So here we go. Let's go to the new book, and I reload the page, and you see my first input field is perfectly focused, all good. But you might have noticed if I navigate to books and navigate back to new book, my input isn't focused anymore. Why? Single page applications, yes. So autofocus is being evaluated just when the page is loaded. And that already happened, and it won't be evaluated the second time. So in this rare case, when you have to use autofocus, please mind that you have to set your focus yourself. So it's again the same when the, excuse me, after navigation and you just take your element, in this case an input, and focus it yourself. And then it will work every single time when the component is initialized. Yeah, next step. Status messages. Well, the problem with JavaScript and TypeScript is that they work silently. So that if you change the content via JavaScript or TypeScript, the screen reader users won't get it. So we should inform them about the changes. And you have more or less 4 options. The option number 1 is more of a usability, just warn them. For example, the search results will appear as you type so that they know what to expect. The next option is if the new content is being added just after the trigger, for example, like the button and then the text that will be disclosed after that. It's also fine because that's the natural reading order and the screen reader user will be able to get this information. The third option would be to move the focus. For example, if you open a modal, then you have to move the focus on the modal. And now everyone think about your cookie banners. That's a homework. Just check if you move the focus to cookie banners, because that's the use case where it's usually forgotten. So, and the fourth option is live regions. Live regions is the ARIA, is part of ARIA, where you can put it on an element and the screen reader will watch this element. And if there are any changes in content to this element, they will be announced. In this case, we have some syntactical sugar from Angular called Live Announcer. And I decided to announce page titles upon navigation. And I already have my custom strategy, and I just injected the Live Announcer, and I call announce and give some text, in this case a title. And what happens in my code, in the application, Angular automatically adds a div at the end of my document, and this is not the code that I wrote myself. And it has ARIA live for the live region. It says that, by the way, it's polite, so it waits till the previous announcements are finished. Then I have ARIA atomic true, meaning that the whole content of this node will be announced and not only the changes. And then there is this new book. This is the title, which I made this live announcer announce. So if I navigate to books, first of all, let's focus this div again. And if I navigate to books, you will see that the text changed. Here is about, etc. So this is actually pure HTML and ARIA that is used here, and Angular just gives me some syntactic sugar, how to deal with that in a nicer way. Next point, forms. Well, it's the central point of many applications, and in here I have a couple of suggestions. I go to new book component. By the way, I forgot to mention this demo project is linked on the slide, so you will get the code after the presentation if you'd like to. So what do you have here? Of course, my labels and inputs are nicely linked with form and ID, but that's not Angular-specific stuff. What I have here is that I can display some error messages only when the user interacted with the input fields, and I have pre-seen and touched for that, so I can check if the form is invalid. I display it just when the user clicked in and moved further. That's a nice feature here. I also added tab index 0 so that the keyboard readers and screen reader users more can focus this via keyboard, and then this message gets announced. But then I also use this error message as linked to the input via ARIA described, so that whenever the user enters this input field, and the input field is invalid, hence I have this message displayed, then it will be announced additionally. Well, Angular specific thing here is ng submit. I can put it on the form, and this is well less accessible, more usable feature, feature of usability. It gives me keyboard functionality on enter wherever I am on the form. So if I press enter, this form will be submitted. It's just a nice thing to do. However, you have to mind the asynchronous validators because ng-submit doesn't wait for them, and it only works if you just have one action, one button. So if you have reset in your form, it won't work. If you just have a nice one action, one button, it's a nice addendum. Well, the last but not least, and now I switch back to the presentation. Oh no, there's one more. How I'm doing? I'm okay. Nice. The second to last point that I nearly forgot to mention is whenever you iterate through loops, for example, for loop or form arrays, you can create identical elements, which is, well, this element meant to do. The problem with that is if I look at my buttons here and at my links, I have 250 delete buttons and 250 read more buttons. And this is not helpful, especially in case of deletion of what I'm deleting. And in this case, just a small reminder, I'm sure you're already doing it properly. I go to the book item, what I can add at no cost, it's already there, just the book title to my remove button. The same goes for read more, I just add some more information on this particular book that I'm linking to. As you can see here, I use a class visually hidden. I don't use ng4 because ng4 removes the element from the DOM, and if it's not in the DOM, it's not available for assistive technologies. In this case, you should rather use some CSS magic of positioning the element of the screen and making it really small instead of removing it from the DOM. So here, it still looks as your designers want it to look, but it's more accessible because now it provides more specific information. And now the last point. Switching back to the presentation. Well, HTML comes with the spec, and according to the spec, you just cannot randomly nest elements. If you will try to nest a div element in the unnumbered list, it won't be rendered because that's how the rules work. You need list items in your unnumbered list, and you have the add_for for this, and then you have this nice add_empty. But here the question is, what should you put in this empty area? Well, you can't put a div because it won't be rendered, but you can put a list item if there is no list item. Well, this list item with the text, the list is empty, is not very semantic. So the problem with, this is more of a situation where you should mind it. Instead, you can just use if and else and check it, and that's more semantic. The same goes for, oh, by the way, I forgot to thank Eunice and Sam for bringing up this example in our conversations. So yeah, the same goes for field sets and legions. Legion element has to be the first nested element in the field set so that screen readers have this information and will announce the accessible name of it. The same goes for captions and tables. So if the caption has to be the first nested element. So you have to mind your custom components, how you cut them so that it works semantically and it will be properly announced. So yeah, coming to the final question, our question again, and the final answer is actually, it's up to you how you code your application and what you do with the accessibility and your Angular code. Thank you very much. And please do talk to me in the breaks.
Thank you, Maria.